The Maelstrom Hunter by Crimson QB Sage, Chapter 5, The Emerald Forest, Part 1, Emerald Forest, third POV. The forest seemed calm. It was an early morning. The sun had just come up the horizon. The morning dew still clung to patches of grass as the forest appeared to gleam a shiny green, much like the color of an emerald, hence the name of the forest. A blackbird was chirping out in the sky, flying. The time of day added with the position of the lighting gave the bird a majestic look to it. Suddenly a red-black blur zipped right through the blackbird as it gave a final shriek and was replaced with a burst of feathers. "Birdie, no!" Ruby cried out as she fell down into the forest. As she was falling, she fired off a few rounds from her scythe. Crescent rose in an attempt to slow her fall speed. Seeing that she had yet to slow down to an appropriate speed, she changed Crescent Rose out of its sniper form into a giant red scythe and caught the blade on one of the tree branches. At the same time, the white-haired girl, whose name was found to be Weiss hopped from a white snowflake she had summoned with her rapier. The black-haired boy with the magenta highlight, Lyrin, descended whilst spinning in the air and used his twin trench knife pistols to spiral down the trunks of a large tree and hit the ground. Brushing the dust off his clothes, he looked up just in time to see the yellow blur that was Yang flying from the forest. "Woohoo! Yeah, alley-oop!" Yang exclaimed as she flew through the air, using her dual-range shot gauntlets and basilica to shoot herself further and further north until she finally crashed through the leaves of a tree, only to leap from tree trunks and tumble to the ground. "Nailed it!" she exclaimed. The girl with red hair that wore Spartan-like armor, Pyronikos, had just landed on a high tree branch. Switching her weapon from a blade into a rifle, she looked through the scope and evaluated her surroundings. Off in the distance, Pyro saw a flailing John screaming as he fell helplessly. Switching her rifle once again, only this time into a spear, she pulled her right hand back, ready to throw the spear, whilst her left hand was used to aim her throw. It only took a moment for her to aim until she threw the spear across the air. Thunk! As the resonating sound of said spear impaled itself into a tree. "Thank you," John cried out in the distance. "I'm sorry," Pyro replied whilst waving. The monkey faunus had landed on a tree branch and in a feat that was normally seemed impossible, jumped from the branch to another nearly half a kilometer away and kept on doing the same thing until he landed on the ground below. The horse faunus was hopping from tree branch to tree branch. After jumping roughly a kilometer north, he suddenly jumped from the branch he was on to the ground below, creating a spiderweb crater as he impacted against the ground. "About time you got here," the monkey faunus said. "Oh, shut up, Roshi. You aren't exactly the easiest person to find." The now-identified Roshi just scoffed in annoyance. "Did you find Fu?" "I was able to sense her near the other one," Roshi replied. "That seems coincidental, don't you think?" the horse faunus asked. "I've seen many things, Han, and I've learned from experience that people like us just seem to be trouble magnets." With Ruby's POV, "Gotta find Yang, gotta find Yang, gotta find Yang, gotta find," I thought as she frantically searched for her sister. Yang," I exclaimed, hoping that she was nearby. "Oh, this is bad. This is really bad. What if I can't find her?" I thought. If I couldn't find her in time, I had to consider my other options. "Well, there's John. He's nice. He's funny," I considered. "I don't think he's very good in a fight, though." A mental image of a cartoon version of John came to mind, fighting Beowulfs. It didn't end very well for him as he was assaulted by the Beowulfs. "Oh, what about Blake? So mysterious, so calm. Plus she likes books. Then again, I'm not sure I'd be able to hold a conversation with her." Another mental image came to mind, and only this time it was a cartoon version of Blake. She was walking away from a cartoon version of me as I talked to her while she moved further away from me. Then there's Naruto. I thought. A small noticeable blush appeared on my face. If I couldn't find Yang, maybe I'd find Naruto. Yeah, me and Naruto, maybe if we're on the same team, we'll get closer. And then I shook my head of the daydreams. I was going off track with my train of thoughts. Okay, who else do I know in the school? There's Yang, Naruto, John, Blake, and time seemed to slow down as I skipped to a halt and I approached the clearing with a familiar girl with white hair and a rapier. I stopped just in time for our eyes to meet, followed by a pregnant pause. Her eyes were light blue and had a cold, calculated feel to them. All of a sudden, Weiss turned on her heels and walked away from me. Shaken out of my musings, I waved forward a bit. "Wait, where are you going?" I exclaimed, stopped and kicked the ground, slightly dejected. We're supposed to be teammates. I followed Weiss for another few meters before we heard another voice. Come on, stupid! I heard John exclaim as he struggled to free himself from the spear lodged in his hood. As he saw Weiss, he gave an embarrassed wave. Weiss simply headed back in the direction she came from, causing John to groan in dejection. By no means does this make us friends, she stated as she dragged me by my hood. You came back, I exclaimed cheerfully, with John, third POV. Wait, come on, come back. Who's going to get me down from here? John exclaimed as the two girls went further and further away from him. John, came a female voice from below him. John looked down to see the owner of the spear that was currently embedded in his hood. Pyro looked up at his predicament. Do you have any spots left on your team? The redhead girl asked. Very funny, John said, crossing his arms, eventually looking down at her and gave a smile, which she returned. Emerald Forest cliffside. Here we find two people standing on the cliff, Glinda and Ospen, the latter taking a sip of his coffee as he looked at his tablet that showed each student during their initiation. Nothing said a good morning like a cup of espresso and launching your students into a forest filled with deadly monsters. Of course, that's not to say that the instructors on the ground wouldn't assist if necessary, as they didn't want any of the students actually dead before they graduated. All was quiet as the duo watched the students search for partners and head towards the northern ruins of the forest, until suddenly a beeping sound was heard from one of the comlinks the instructors all had. The only time one of those went off was if a student wasn't able to pass initiation. Or, what is it? Ospen asked as he held his index and middle finger on his left hand to his ear, which held his comlink. Sir, something's happened, a frantic voice of an instructor yelled from the link. What exactly do you mean by that? Ospen asked calmly. There's an unknown signature that appeared in the forest scanning area. Hearing this, Ospen raised his left brow in confusion. It could be just a flying type, Grim, Ospen countered. No, you don't understand. When I say it appeared in the forest, I mean it literally just appeared right in front of me. Both Glinda and Ospen's eyes widened at that. It's not every day that an unknown signature appeared in the forest. They know like the back of their hands. Can you give us a clear visual for the creature? Glinda asked. Yeah, I think I can. Give me a second, the man said. Soon enough, a larger screen popped up from the center of the screens that showed the students. The image shown was a camera with a few leaves at the bottom of the screen. What was the main focus of their attention was the creature they were seeing. The creature had a long, dark purple serpent-like body, yet it resembled the leech. The fact that its body wasn't a midnight black like all of the Grims was odd in itself. It also had 5 red hair-like strands sprouting from its face, and it had no mask on its face with a weird symbol that wasn't recognizable. What is that thing? Glinda asked worriedly. I don't know. It looks like some sort of leech or maybe a serpent. Suddenly the leech started to sniff around as if it were searching for something. After sniffing the area for 30 seconds, it took off in a general direction. Sir, the beast is. It's headed north, Ospen finished. But the only thing that's north is, Glinda started, eyes slightly widened by the end of her statement. Sir, just give the order and I can... No, we can't interfere unless it succeeds in attacking the students. Hopefully it won't come to that, Ospen thought as he watched the beast retreat in form. Emerald Forest, Naruto's POV. I landed on a high branch after making my landing, pushing chakra into my feet as I jumped from branch to branch, each one descending to the ground until I finally landed on the ground itself. Looking around at my surroundings, I saw I was in a small clearing with a few patches of grass lying around. The vast green extended out into the distant horizon. Hey, QB, can you sense anyone nearby? I mentally asked the QB. I learned over the years that since the QB shared senses with me, it can also sense out energy signatures. Yeah, sure, whatever, just give me a sec, the QB responded. It took a few moments before I got a response. Head north by northeast. I sense an energy signature there. Nodding my head, I headed in the direction the QB told me. As soon as I came across another person, a familiar face. Yo, I yelled. It was the girl who had the mint green hair. I gave her a lazy wave as she saw me. Hey, aren't you the guy who had the motion sickness? She asked, which made me face vault. At least I didn't throw up, I countered. So, I started deciding to change the subject. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Nice to meet you, she stated. I'm Fu. Likewise, I said. I looked north, attempted to see any signs of the ruins we were told to go to. We should probably start heading north, I stated, beginning to walk north. Yeah, We started walking north, an awkward silence between us for most of the journey. So, what kind of weapon do you got there? I asked her, attempting to break the awkward silence. Well, these two are tonfa gun hybrids, she replied, pulling out her weird-looking tonfas. What about you? Well, I got these guns and two blades, I simply stated, nudging to my blades at my side and on my back and the guns in my hands. Do they transform into anything? She asked. No, but they can control the elements, I replied. Neither of us talked. This would be a long journey. With Yang, third POV. Here we find Yang searching for her sister, poking through the bushes in a curious manner. Hello, she called out. Is anyone out there? Hello, I'm getting bored here. Suddenly there was a rustling noise coming from the bushes behind her. Is someone there? She called out in an attempt to get an answer. Soon enough, she poked her head through the source of the noise. Ruby, is that you? The response she got was a low, inhuman growl as she raised her head to look at the source of the sound. Nope. Yang quickly rolls to the side as an Ursa charged out of the green. She gets up and activates her amber silica, staring at the monster before another Ursa runs out behind her. She leaps over it, and its companion runs at her again, only to get knocked back by a fiery punch. The other Ursa and Yang charge at each other, and Yang manages to get under it and deliver several punches and a kick to send the creature back. You guys wouldn't happen to have seen a girl in a red hood, would you? She asked. The Ursa merely growled at her. You could just say no. Suddenly one of the Ursa stands on its legs and swipes at her twice. Yang barely dodges the attack. After dodging the attack, she merely laughed. Geez, you two couldn't hit the broadside of a ball. Before she could complete her insult towards the beast, a single strand of her golden hair falls in front of her face and lands on the forest floor. If there was one thing that a person should always remember about Yang, it's to not cut her hair. You, she started, her eyes being covered by the shadow cast down by her hair, and her hair splitting into 9 different clusters that seemed to float around despite gravity, only for her to look up, her once violet eyes now red and filled with rage. You monsters! An inferno surrounds Yang for a moment, and she rockets forward, unleashing a devastating combo of flaming hits and blows on the offending Ursa, making it fly through several burning trees. The other monster runs over, but stops short at Yang's gaze while a tree falls to the ground behind her. What? You want some too? Yang yelled at the petrified beast. No matter what species the saying always goes, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. The Ursa prepared to strike, but suddenly a whirling noise was heard from behind the beast, and it makes a befuddled noise, falling down a second later to reveal Blake with her katana, gamble shroud, in the beast's back. Yang pants in exhaustion while Blake recalled her weapon back to her hand, sheathing it on her back and smiling at Yang, smiling to the side. Yang, her eyes now back to their usual violet, only scoff. I could have taken him with Ruby and Weiss. What was that? That should have been easy, Ruby exclaimed, both her and Weiss having recently escaped an encounter with a pack of Beowulfs. Or perhaps if you had exercised even the slightest amount of caution with the placement of your strikes, I wouldn't have set the forest on fire, Weiss countered, causing Ruby to scoff. What's that supposed to mean? Ruby cried out. I'm surprised someone who talks so much would communicate so little during an encounter. Well, I'm sorry you need my help to win a fight. I'm just fine on my own. Well, congratulations on being the strongest child to sneak your way into Beacon. Bravo. Weiss started walking away yet again. Ruby, with an agitated shriek, unfolds crescent rows, slices the tree down to the stump, refolds it back, and follows her partner as the tree crashes behind her, neither noticing the large dark feather floating onto the fallen trunk behind them. With John and Pyra, meanwhile, in another part of the forest, Pyra and John made their way north. As they walked, John hears a noise far away. Did you hear that? John asked his partner. Gunfire. It seems some of our comrades have encountered the enemy, Pyra replied. The two continued moving forward, John still staring at the direction the sound came from, and not noticing Pyra raise a branch to pass by. Said branch is accidentally released just in time to hit John in the face, flooring him instantly. John, I'm sorry, Pyra exclaimed as she looked behind to see him get hit by the branch. It's okay, just a scratch, John said lightheartedly, getting back up from his fall as Pyra approached him. Why didn't you activate your aura? Pyra asked. Huh? John replied, not entirely sure on what the answer to her question was. Your aura? Pyra clarified. Kisun dehit? John replied. John, do you know what aura is? Pyra asked. Of course I do. Do you know what aura is? John countered, waving the question off and avoiding eye contact with Ren. Insert John and Pyra voiceover. Here we find a male teenager with long black hair with a magenta streak in it, tied up in a ponytail, wearing a dark green diagonal button long sleeve tailcoat with black and gold trimming. Currently, we find said person lie Ren trickling through the forest tall grass. Aura is the manifestation of our soul. It bears our burdens and shields our hearts. Have you ever felt you were being watched without knowing that someone was there? The voice of Pyra asked John. At the same time she asked him that question, Ren sneezed for no appropriate reason. Yeah. Ren suddenly stops and narrows his eyes, looking around him with a huge black grin. The serpent rises up from the grass behind him and quickly surrounds him with its large hissing body. Ren adopted a sitting stance as the snake coils together in front of him and attacks with its long fangs. With practice, our aura can be our shield. Everyone has it, even animals, Pyra said as she walked around John. What about monsters? John asked. No, the monsters we fight lack a soul. They are creatures of grim, the manifestations of anonymity. Pyra replied. Meanwhile, Ren was fighting the snake-like creature. The snake's mouth hit the ground as it tried to attack Ren, instantly coming up again as Ren leapt out of its way and hitting said person with its snout. He landed in a crouch and brought out his stormflower as the serpent prepared to attack again. They are darkness and we are light, Pyra finished. Right, that's why we fight them, John exclaimed as Ren kicked the snake's snout and slashed at its head. It's not about why, it's about knowing. The snake flows around Ren and tries to bite him again, but he flips over it and drives his weapons into its head, pushing a moment without sensing the serpent's white head behind him. Understanding darkness and light helps us manifest our aura. Everyone has some of both. Ren turns and looks up at the white head as it launches itself at him, dodging it and landing just in time to see the head slither towards him. As it gets closer, he runs at it and leaps onto the black head, sliding over its head and blasting the other head. By bearing your soul outwards as a force, you can deflect harm. All of our tools and equipment are conduits for aura. You protect yourself and your soul when fighting, Pyra continued. Ren was caught unprepared as the white half attacked him, hitting his head and knocking him off as he dropped his weapons, and leaving him to merely raise his arms and distantly cry "no" to the mouth of the black head. It's like a force field, John said in Revelation. Yes, if you want to look at it that way, Pyra replied. Ren is now holding the front fangs of the colossal snake in his hands, glowing a faint, pulsating pink as he grips the teeth and yanks them from the monster's mouth, causing it to flail away. It attempts to bite him again, but Ren pins to the side and stabs a fang in its eye, rotating his arm to deliver a final blow that delivers the makeshift weapons into its skull, which ripples, expands, and blows apart in a dark mess as its headless body falls over its fellow creature. Wasting no time, Ren runs right at the white head. Back with John and Pyra. Now close your eyes and concentrate, Pyra told John, walking up to him and touching the side of his head. Okay, John complied. Pyra smiled and closed her own eyes, opening them as her skin glows and her irises shrink before shutting them again. The two stood there, now with Pyra glowing a faint red and John a bright white. For it is in passing that we achieve immortality. Through this we become a paragon of virtue and glory to rise above all, infinite in distance and unbound by death, Pyra mentally said as she placed her hand on his chest. I release your soul, and by my shoulder protect thee. She finished, her red glow disappearing and hunching over in tiredness. Pyra, John asked in concern, still glowing. It's all right. I used my aura to unlock yours, but the energy that protects you now is your own, she replied as she got back up, grinning as she watched the scratch close up and vanish. You have a lot of it. Wow, John said, smiling and looking at his hands as the glow disappeared. After a minute, the two realized just how close their bodies were to each other. Both had a blush spread across their face as they stood there just looking away from the other. Back with Ren. At the same time, Ren stood atop of the body of his enemy, sliding the weapons into his sleeves and brushing them off before a strange animal-like noise was heard above him twice. Looking up, he saw his childhood friend looking at him as she was upside down, hanging from a low-lying tree branch. I still don't think that's what a sloth sounds like, Ren sighed, nevertheless smiling at her shenanigans. In response, Nora gave him a boop on the nose. Side story start. The Maelstrom Hunter, Remnants of the Past, Part 1, Princess Kaguya. Long ago, before the Shinobi World Wars, before the Faunus War, before the days of the Clan Wars, before the days of darkness, before those days, there was no chakra or aura in Shinobi or Hunters. No, before those days, the earth was of one, unified land, united by the earth, but divided by conflict. There were three main factions, each ruled by a different leader. Firstly, the oldest of the three factions was led by King Arthur, who was a fair and just king to his people. Secondly, there was Pharaoh Scorpion, who was the warmonger of the three, having already conquered over the lands ruled by Hammurabi and by Shin Huan, and was at war with the last two factions. And finally, the youngest of the three factions was led by Princess Kaguya, who was kind, yet ruled with an iron fist. Now, as said before, there was a war between the factions. Pharaoh Scorpion fought against King Arthur and Princess Kaguya. The Pharaoh's armies had proven their worth in battle, defeating nearly all of Arthur and Kaguya's armies, and now said army was headed towards Princess Kaguya's capital city-state, Kyoto. What made the situation more grim was the fact that Kaguya's army was outnumbered. For every one soldier Kaguya had, there were 20 scorpions. But desperate times called for desperate measures, as here we find the pale-skinned, red-haired Shinto princess at the base of a divine beam. The origin of this being is unknown, only known by the elder advisor of King Arthur, who are very unsure of its origin themselves. But what is known is that said divine being took the form of a massive tree, its trunk spanning 10 miles in diameter, standing higher than the clouds themselves. At the peak of the tree there was a massive flower that had blossomed, and hidden behind the cover of those petals was a giant eye. Its color was crimson red and had four concentric rings with 9 tomo, 3 tomo on 3 of the rings close to the cornea. The divine tree, just like any tree, bears fruit, but the fear of its power stopped any of the three kingdoms from consuming its fruit. That is, until now. As Princess Kaguya approached the base of the divine tree, she dropped to her knees and gave a silent, quick prayer to the gods to help her defend her capital. After she was done, she moved to the base of the tree and picked off one of the low-lying fruit from its branches. She then proceeded to do what none before her had done. She consumed the fruit of the Shinju tree. Feeling the power of the divine being course through her veins, her appearance changed. From on top of her head sprouted 2 horns like appendages that resembled that of a moon rabbit. Her once royal purple eyes turned a bright white, giving her a divine aura, and a third eye appeared in the center of her forehead, opening to reveal the eye that the Shinju had hidden behind its massive petals. Standing back up from her kneeling position in front of the divine tree, she turned around and walked back towards her palace. With the power of the Shinju in tow, she would defend her kingdom from its invaders and bring forth peace. Side story end. End of chapter 5.